So, welcome everybody. Today we are going to be doing a little bit of a presentation slash review slash discussion on my personal favorite Trader Legion in 40k, and my personal favorite Legion actually in general, which are the Night Lords. The Chaos Space Marine Codex have just recently been updated and all the new rules have come in. Night Lords are, of course, as a big passion of mine. I have many things to say, so I have put together a 13-page, it's in higher font though, presentation slash review of all the things in the Codex. If you do not understand Warhammer, this will most likely be gibberish to you, but if you're watching anyway, then I fully appreciate it. And yeah, let's go ahead and get into it for the time being. Pop myself down here in the bottom. I'll occasionally make myself big once in a while, maybe not, as I discuss the various things that the Night Lords Legion has to offer. So to start off, who are the Night Lords? Say you play 40k, but you do not really know much about the Night Lords Legion as a whole in terms of their lore. They are the 8th Space Marine Legion, and they are known for being a whole bunch of terrorists. They are murderers, other words that I can't say on YouTube, as well as other just scum, gangers, and hitmen, etc., torturers, and so on. And this group of, you know, just villainy, scum is the word for them, general street scum, ended up becoming demigod warriors because they were the only people ready to be implanted with the Space Marine genes. They are all about spreading terror and fear. They like to play with their food a lot. They like to maim and flay and maul and take higher ups and display them to scare everyone else. They are entirely about picking with their food. They don't ever fight straight, ever. They're constantly picking on the weak, and they will tend to run away plenty if you are stronger than them. That's kind of the fun thing, is they fight not like bold, strong Space Marines. They're underhanded, they're assholes, they are scum, and that's what is a lot more fun about them. And that's important to note because it plays a large role into their actual gameplay. And I think if they did one thing well when it comes to Night Lords, they did their service well with the fluffy side of things. So in terms of the actual gameplay, their Legion trait is Terror Tactics. While they are within 9 inches of an enemy unit, they subtract their leadership by 2, and they subtract their combat attrition by 1. This does a couple things. Minus leadership is obviously very good for people to fail morale. Minus 2 and 9 inches is pretty substantial. And minus 1 combat attrition is also good because if you do fail morale, you tend to lose more units. As you don't know, if you say roll a morale test and you fail, you then lose 1 model, and then you roll a dice for every single other model in the unit. And on an unmodified 1, you lose another guy. It is decreased by 1, meaning 1s and 2s, if you are under half strength. And because of the Night Lords, it would be an additional 1 then as well, which would make it 1, 2s, and 3s, which is 50%. And that can be pretty solid. The second part is that their trait with a melee weapon makes it so that if you attack an enemy below half strength or with a leadership of 5 or less, you add 1 to the wound roll. So this is the picking on the weak part of it. Night Lords like to bully those who are lesser than them. So if you have a low leadership and you're easily scared, they fight you better. Or if you are massively injured under half strength, they fight you better. The nice thing about this is that the under half strength makes it very powerful, not powerful, but very useful against armies that you would never ever have a leadership of 5 against. Say things like large blocks of custodes, or just custodes in general, high leadership things like maybe some sisters or some CSM as well, things where you just can't reach that leadership percentage or leadership threshold. You can still get it. That being said, under half strength is a bit of a rarity and it won't come into play a lot. Normally you're fishing for the leadership 5 or less. Now, this is really good into armies that have a low leadership. Imperial Guard is one of the obvious ones. They have a leadership of 7 on their infantry squad sergeants, so you are instantly getting it, which is just pretty crushing, to be honest. Gene Stealer cults as well. You might not get it as much, but they do run a lot more, and you can utilize it a lot with your other leadership reducing units, Raptors, Possessed. Orcs are particularly susceptible to this, often being in squads of 10 or more. And for each one that runs, it can be pretty darn painful. Orcs have a problem with leadership to begin with, and this compounding with Night Lords can make it actually very rough on them. And finally, ironically enough, Nids are a great fight into Night Lords. You might think, what the fuck? Why are Nids ever going to be this way? Well, it's because Nids will be fearless and they'll never run away when they're within a synapse creature. But synapse creatures have the high leadership. All the other non-synapse bugs don't, to represent the fact that if the synapse breaks, the Nids are not as intelligent and they start freaking out and stuff. So because you're actually taking the leadership characteristic of Nids and not them running away, you're almost constantly getting this. Did you know like a Carnifex has leadership 6 or 7? So you just need to, like, you're automatically getting +1 to wound against Carnifexes. Termagants have like leadership 6. You know, only the synapse models like warriors or Tervagons have leadership 9 or something of that nature. So a lot of them, like Toxicreens, Trigons, Molochs, I think even Molochs, yeah, they all have leadership 7 or 6. So you're constantly getting +1 to wound against almost the entire army just because. It's a little bizarre. This is okay into AdMech. AdMech has data tethers very often, which gives them +1 leadership. They'll only be sitting around leadership 8 or 9, but often their squads can be a little bit big and they don't have a whole lot of anti-morale shenanigans besides one stratagem. So if they're taking like big blocks of Skitarii, you might be able to break them down a little bit. Eldar, same thing. Squads of Guardians or 5-man squads of various other things. They sit around the leadership 8 to 9 area, but they also don't have a whole lot of anti-leadership stuff. So you can maybe make a couple run here and there between the Drukhari and the craft worlds. And lastly, Sisters. This is mainly because they take generally big blocks of units. Leadership 8 and 9 are present in some Sisters, for example, Celestians, and they can miracle dice their morale tests, which can be tough, but sometimes you can only miracle dice one thing per phase, and sometimes big squads of say 10 Repentia, 10 Zephyrim, 20 block of regular Sisters can cause a bit of a problem, despite the fact that they don't have too bad of a leadership. Bad into Custodes. They have leadership 11. Good luck. The most you can get as a negative is leadership -3. So, nah. You bring them down to leadership 8, and then only then, if you kill 3 of them, which is the general squad size of Custodes, then they might run. It's not going to happen. Don't even try. Focus on the half strength part of it if you can. Deathwing Dark Angels. This is a tough one. Deathwing have a leadership of 9 on the sergeants, so you will never bring them down to enough of a threshold. Not only that, but you also can never get your +1 to wound against them because they are permanently transhuman. And you also can't make them run because they're fearless. I have fought Deathwing Dark Angels multiple times. Your trait literally does not exist. It does not exist. Sucks to suck, you don't get it. Knights. I mean, this should be obvious. It's one model. They can't run. It's a knight, you know, like, sorry. And lastly, ironically, CSM. CSM's leadership is quite high. Base Legionaries have a leadership of 9. Chosen have 10. I think even Terminators might have 10. If they don't have 10, they have 9. I think most of the characters have 10 as well. You really can't do well in the CSM, surprisingly. You might make them run, but yeah, not a ton. Shockingly, CSM's pretty tough. Overall, if the enemy has big squads or just low leadership in general, you'll do pretty well against them. I'm glad they did the whole half strength thing, but even with that, it doesn't always work. We'll talk a little bit later about a stratagem called the Sound of the Black Hunt, which will have a little bit of a combination that I would like to work into the main trait, but we'll see about that. Anywho, that is the main Terror Tactics trait of Night Lords. Let's move on to their secondary objective, which is very fun. It is called Sow the Seed, Reap the Fear. Now, this is a no mercy, no respite objective, which is pretty good because that's a generally uncontested category. Battlefield supremacy and shadow operations tend to have a lot of good stuff in them, and removing that is pretty good. If you choose this secondary, you score 1 victory point every time one of these things happens. The enemy fails a morale test, the enemy falls back, the enemy fails an action, or if you destroy an enemy unit by a melee attack and you roll 2d6 and the result equals or exceeds the leadership characteristic of that model, the final model that is, you score a victory point. So, there's a couple things to state about this one. Number one, this is really fluffy. This is arguably the most fluffy secondary for an army I can think of. It's just so much fun. Now, the fact that it involves failing a morale test or falling back or just ripping things up, it adds more of a fluff thing than you actually think about. For example, if you want to force your opponent to make multiple morale fails, let's say your opponent has 4 or 5 guard squads in vicinity, you might just start shooting down various guard squads and plinking off models on each of them. This is a very Night Lords thing because you're just kind of plucking away their friends and instilling fear. Maybe 3 of those guard squads just fail leadership, lose a bunch of models, and you get 3 points that objective or that turn alone. It's very Night Lords, just pick away people, you know, just kind of remove it and freak them out. When the enemy falls back is also great. This is one of the bread and butter versions, especially against certain armies like Tau and Guard, because if the enemy is falling back, one, that can spike really damn hard. Imagine you move a bunch of fast moving units up and you just ram them into various things like rhinos or Lehman Russ tanks or Tau battle suits. They have to pick. Do I stay in combat, mind you, with Night Lords, or do I fall back and give you free points? Because there's a possibility that on their turn, I might just cut them up anyway, which will let me get a point if I roll higher than their leadership. Which, not to mention, it's the result equals or exceeds the leadership characteristic, which is on top of modifiers. So you need to roll 2d6 after you've already done your -2 leadership from them, which adds a lot to it. Failing an action doesn't really happen. Don't ever expect this to work. This is only if they ever do one of those things where it takes a whole command phase to the next command phase to do and you kill them. It's really nothing special on that one. This is a lot of fun. It can spike very, very hard. There are times where if you just play your cards right, you use your movement proper, you will get stuck up in a bunch of very squishy, important targets for your enemy. And then you need to give them a choice. Do you fall back for me and give me a whole bunch of points? Or do you, I can get 5 points in 1 turn just because they had to fall back a ton of units or else die next turn. And then maybe give me some points as well. Similarly to the Night Lord's Legion trait, would I use this against Custodes? No. Would I use this against Knights? No. Would I use this against Guard? Yes. Would I use this against Gene Stealer cults? Yes. Eldar? Most likely. It is pretty darn usable with that kind of thing. It forces your opponent to make tons of weird decisions. The category is wonderful. It is matchup dependent, but it's very fluffy and it can spike really hard. I like this secondary actually quite a bit. Moving on. Let's talk Warlord traits. I'd say the Night Lords have some of, if not the best Warlord traits in the book. This is where the Night Lords really shine, is their Warlord traits and stratagems in particular. I think Word Bearers have some pretty good traits too, but I love the Warlord traits of the Night Lords. The first one we have here is called the Night Haunter's Curse. I love this one. Once per turn, you can change the result of a single advance roll, hit roll, wound roll, or saving throw to be a 6. This counts as an unmodified 6 for all rules purposes. There's a couple things you should note here. There are, in fact, 3 things you should note here. 1, once per turn. Not battle round, turn. Your turn and the opponent's. 2, it counts as an unmodified 6. And 3, you can change the result. So this is not a miracle dice type of thing. You can make the roll before you change the roll. So what happens, let's say you take a whole bunch of saves, a bunch of damage 3 things because you're fighting an opponent's major guy. You have a 4-up invul save. You roll all your dice. You end up actually doing really well with your saves and you only failed 2. But those 2 might kill you because you only have 6 HP or something. Well, guess what? It's a 6 now. Bam, you're good. And then let's say the 2 of you are still stuck in combat. The next turn, your opponent's turn, you still have the 6 to go with. Because it's per turn. This is a usable thing on fighting, on defense, even movement. I mean, an advanced roll to be a 6 is really strong. It's highly undervalued. Can you imagine taking a Disco Lord with a 2-up save and Armor of Contempt, and you give them the Mark of Tzeentch and the Night Haunter's Curse? Guess what? The first failed saving throw they make after they roll it turns to a 0 per turn, and then you turn the other one into a 6. It is basically 2 free gimme saves a turn. He's not gonna die. There's an option that you might want to take more damage on him instead of the stuff, but it's the point. Targets for this thing. Master of Executions. Oh my god. The Master of Executions has an axe called the Axe of Dismemberment, where on an unmodified hit roll of 6, it does 2 mortal wounds and the attack sequence ends. This bitch has 6 attacks. Because it is changing a roll, you get to roll all 6 dice, see if any of them are a 6, and then change a non-6 into a 6. I played with this one time. I rolled for the executions. I spiked and got 3 6s, failed 3, turned 1 into a 6. I did 8 mortal wounds before I even started wounding. And I was in wanton slaughter, so I actually hit with all 6 of my attacks. And then I wounded with all 6, which gets full rerolls to wound because it was against the character. Disco Lord and Demon Prince, great because of how tanky they are. Warp's Malice Relic is also good. This is a bolt pistol with the exact same ability. Hit rolls of a 6, do 2 mortal wounds. 18 inches, 4 shots on turn 2 and onward. Roll all 4 dice, and then change it. Now, there's something I should also note. There is a Slaanesh stratagem to, like, kind of prep a changed dice into a 6, like with the Night Haunter's Curse. It only works if you're marked with Slaanesh. The problem, I'm not sure about this, is that it allows you to do the same thing as this, where you can roll the dice and then change it to a 6. So in theory, you could actually, with 1 CP, do this twice. Use the Night Haunter's Curse and then the Slaanesh thing, and god, it's a lot of 6s, right? Problem is that the Slaanesh one says, change the value of a die to a 6. I don't know if that counts as a modifier, because it's not plus or minus. It's not plus or minus. That's a modifier. But unlike this Warlord trait, the Slaanesh stratagem does not say this counts as an unmodified 6 for all rules purposes. So it doesn't have this little extra text at the end of it, so I don't know if it counts. I think a tournament organizer would have to tell that, because it's not being modified in the sense of plus or minus. It is just you are changing it. So it's a bit of a weird one. The Sisters of Battle have a special ability called Moment of Grace. It's a stratagem where you change a dice roll by 1 or 2 depending on the miracle dice that is being discarded, but that's plus 1 or 2, so that would be a plus, like a modifier. There's a Night Lords player who has been using this in tournaments recently and has been doing the Slaanesh ability, so I don't know if maybe he got the okay by the TO or not, but I would like a FAQ or someone to, you know, tell me with this one, because I'm not sure. Anyway, next up is a Warlord trait called One Piece at a Time. Each time the warlord is selected to fight after it has finished fighting, if it killed any models, they have a -1 combat attrition until the next morale phase. Also, if they make a consolidation move, even if it's already touching something, it can move in any direction as long as it stays 3 inches away. This is a weird one. This has the ability to spike really goddamn hard against certain armies and be totally useless against others. The -1 combat attrition is not bad. However, there's this problem where it won't matter against, you know, knights or something like that. But imagine this scenario, right? You're fighting orcs, 30 squad of orc boys. You roll up, you kill a few things. Then you can consolidate 3 inches away. This allows you to not be fought after this. You can fight and just not be fought, or perhaps pull yourself out of combat. Next thing you know, the orcs fail their leadership. They lose a guy. They're maybe under half strength. And so now they are losing orc boys, not on 1s, but 2s. And then the Warlord Traits, so 1, 2, and 3. And then this, so 1, 2, 3s, and 4s. Every dice, they have a 66% chance to lose a model on every remaining orc boy. That can be pretty disgusting, especially when combined with that one stratagem to allow you to stop them from using the insane bravery stratagem with Chaos Undivided. The problem is that if you're the one doing the fighting and you move out, you're no longer in combat, so you might actually just get shot next turn, depending on what's going on in that combat fight, like phrase. The second problem is that it's, you know, you're exposing your character a little bit, and it might make them a little bit fragile. It's really good on characters that are really fighty, or for example, fragile characters in general. And I might actually even say taking this is a good idea if you're in a team tournament and you can pick who you're fighting, but not always. It's a bit situational. It's probably my least favorite of the Warlord traits. Despite that, it's still not bad. Next up, Murderous Reputation. While an enemy unit with the objective secured abilities within 6 inches of the Warlord, it loses that ability. It's very boring, but it's really goddamn good. Like, boring, but it's really good. Yes, it's good. Like, there is no army in the entire game that would not enjoy a turn off OBSEC aura. You stick this on a big model with a big base size, Disco Lord or Demon Prince, throw them on an objective, kill off enemy leadership, have your own OBSEC, have your own OBSEC. It's great. It is great. It's just kind of boring. I don't use it a lot because it's kind of boring, but it's really good. It's really good. It's good. It's good. It's good. It's good. It's good. Next up, Killing Fury. Each time the Warlord selected to fight, if it made a charge move, first round of combat basically, you add D3 attacks to the Warlord, and every time it makes a melee attack, it is considered to be in wanton slaughter. So I actually really like Killing Fury. I think the ability to stick two attacks on average on a very fighty character can be pretty darn strong. And the engaged in wanton slaughter part is only good for turn 1 and turn 2. Great for turn 2. You're basically giving them exploding 6s turn 2. Turn 1, it might be a rarity he's going to be in combat at all. You know, like maybe for fighting some enemy that's really down fast, you throw in a DM Prince with wings, possibly. You give him advance and charge by like a Dark Apostle. I don't know. Turn 1, very, very rare, but turn 2, pretty good. The extra attacks is really darn nice with this. D3, it's solid. I think this in particular is incredibly good on a Claw Count Lord or a Demon Prince, particularly with the Nurgle weapon. So there is a relic of Nurgle called Golax the Syphilis, or whatever the fuck. And what it is whenever you make a hit roll, it automatically wounds the enemy and they cannot take any feel no pains or wound gates. Lately, this has been a major player to deal with things like the Nightbringer or Abaddon. So basically what happens is this Demon Prince rolls up with 6 attacks. He hits on 2s, and so long as he hits, there's a good chance he only fails 1 of those. So 5 go through, it auto wounds, and he uses it with his gigantic Hellforged sword. So it's AP 3, pretty good, and damage 3. So all he's got to do is land that on, say, the enemy Nightbringer. And 3, if he's at full HP, only 3 need to go in, and he's dead. It's a great way on dealing with wound gating things, especially all the things like, are they called Phoenix Lords for the Eldar? Them, the Catan, Abaddon, and Gaz, great options here. So, a couple things to note. The relic specifically states if a hit is scored, it auto wounds. So adding an average of 2 attacks to that, going from 6 to 8, is a pretty big deal. And also, because you're in Wanton Slaughter now for everything, 6s to hit, unmodified of course, generate additional hits. Because it is an additional hit, I do believe that counts as auto wounding as well. Normally when they have like 6s auto wound and you have exploding 6s, those explosions don't count, but it says if a hit is scored. So on average, there's a good chance that you actually, with 8 attacks and exploding 6s, on average, you probably get around 8 to 9 wounds in. At AP 3, flat 3 damage. That's pretty gosh darn strong. That's very gosh darn strong. So killing Fury with that combo, I think, is pretty darn good. Moving on. Oh, also, not moving on quite yet, but there's also the Claw Count Lord. Now, Terminator Lords right now are pretty mediocre. They're actually very mediocre. But you can change a Terminator Lord to have his lightning claws, something else called the Claw of the Stygian Count. I'll skip past these really quick so I can talk about this. The Claw of the Stygian Count is a lightning claw replacement that is +2, -3, 2 damage, and you make 2 additional attacks with it, and you cannot use any wound gating stuff or feel no pains like the other one. Now, the Terminator Lord, if I am unmistaken, I will double check, I believe has 6 attacks, maybe 5. Let's find out real quick. The Chaos Lord in Terminator armor has 6 attacks. So now he has 8 attacks with this. You can give him actually a psychic power called Diabolical Strength to give him +2 strength and +2 attacks, allowing him to have then 10 attacks. And then with Killing Fury, he will now have, on average, 12 attacks with exploding 6s. 12 attacks, exploding 6s at strength 8, not 6 because of the Diabolical Strength. At AP 3 and 2 damage, that'll shred. That'll shred. That might not be the worst concept in the world. Though it is also up against Flames of Spite. So it depends on if that's the thing you want to use, but it's not bad. Anyway, the next Warlord trait is called One with the Shadows. The opponent cannot reroll the hit against your Warlord, and they must subtract 1 to hit. Now, as far as defensive things go, this isn't the strongest. No rerolls in general is pretty nasty. It's just always really good. It's really good against any kind of 4+ weapon skill or worse. It's also great if your Warlord ends up getting stuck out in the open, has to be shot by normal 4 uplist skill guns, Tau, Guard, Gene Stealer Colts. Having them hit on 5s with no rerolls is pretty gross. Problem is that RNG is a bit at your mercy. So it really comes down, like, you know, we've all had a character that hits on 3s, and sometimes 3-ups will just fail you. You're just gonna roll 1s and 2s. Like, 3-ups will just fail you. And it happens. It happens. Like, it just will. And that might make it for the enemy that those 3-ups just fail them. because against a character that normally hits on 2s, now they're hitting on 3s unless they have their own +1 hit, and no rerolls. You know, do they hit on 3s to 4s? 4-ups, no rerolls? Like, that's rough. Combine that with a Zinch mark to remove a failed save or a Nurgle mark to make wounding worse. It's not bad. I'd like to try this on a Disco Lord and see how it turns out. I don't think it's quite worth it on any of the small foot guys, but I think it's not bad on a Disco Lord. Maybe a foot lord with a Nurgle mark or a Demon Prince, but it depends on this one. It's up against Night Hunter's Curse as well for the changing of saves. Last but not least, Dirty Fighter. Pick an enemy within 3 inches at the start of the fight phase. They fight last. It's fight last. It's fight last. You got it's fight last, fights last. Targets fight last. It's fight last. It's fights last. It's fights last. It's good. It's fights last. Say it with me, chat. It's fights last. Fights last. Fights last. Fights last. Fights last. Throw on a Slash unit that has fights first, then you're fighting first because he fights last. Fights last. Are you fighting middle? No. It's fights last. Fights last. Fights last. It is fights last. It is always good. Why? Because it's fucking fights last. Throw a Slanesh mark on this dude. You're chilling. You're chilling. Fights last. It's fights last. Throw a Slanesh mark on this guy. Put it on a Disco Lord. Give him fights last. Easy. Fights last. When do they fight? They fight last. They don't fight first. They don't fight normally. They fight last. They fights last. It's fights last. This is one of those Warlord traits where this might be the best Warlord trait in the Night Lord arsenal, but it's also really boring, so I tend not to take it either. But if I'm trying to be super meta strong, you do this one. Fights last. Very good. So, moving on real quick, let's talk stratagems. Night Lord stratagems are very good. I'd say that they are rivaled against Iron Warriors for some of the best stratagems in the CSM Codex. Actually, a couple other ones that are pretty good too. Actually, Emperor's Children have some pretty good ones. Regardless, there are some great stratagems in here. Our first one is in Midnight Clad, a staple. When you are being shot at against an infantry unit besides cultists, -1 to hit. Simple, easy, great. It is 1 CP. A negative to hit is always good. It's a reactive stratagem. You choose it when your opponent attacks you. It's cheap. 1 CP no matter what squad size. 10 Terminators, 1 CP. One guy, like an infantry, 1 CP. It's 1 CP. It's flexible. It's useful. It's always good. In Midnight Clad. Weigh it up. Figure out if you want to use it or not. It is always good. From the Night. Originally a deep strike stratagem. It still is, I guess. But to get +2 to charge if you're in terrain and +1 to hit. This is a new, surprisingly good stratagem. If you have anything in reserves, let's say Raptors or Terminators or anything like that, or Bikers in strategic reserves or as a reinforcement unit, they may now arrive 1 turn earlier. You can bring in a 10 brick of Terminators with the Black Rune of Damnation turn 1. It is only 2 CP if they have the Demonkin keyword, which I believe is only Warp Talons and Oblitz. It's definitely Oblitz. Is it Warp Talons? It is Warp Talons. It's Oblitz and Warp Talons. So, or Possessed, I suppose, if they're in strategic reserves. But, like, this is incredibly strong, in my opinion. I think this is massively undervalued. The ability to bring in a gigantic brick turn 1 is great if you get second turn, and it's nuts if you get first turn, especially considering that a 10 brick of Terminators is 1 CP. Just one. Just one. I use this often as an infiltration. I'll get first turn, and I'll take my 10 Bricky Terminators and I'll just shove them way near the enemy behind some line of sight blocking terrain and they're gonna have to deal with me. Next turn, I move them up if I can't get the charge off, and then I am in their face. If I do get the charge off on a 9-inch charge, even better. I can be right there instantly. It is very nasty. And it particularly combines extremely well with another strategy we'll talk about in a moment. I think From the Night is super sleeper. It's a great strat. Next up is one of the coolest named strats I have ever read. Sound of the Black Hunt. It just rolls off the tongue so well. Sound the Black Hunt. Sorry, my bad. Sound the Black Hunt. Yeah, it's good. So this is what I was going to talk about with the Night Lord's original origin trait. Basically, whenever a core Demon King character is selected to shoot or fight, if they are of leadership 6 or under starting, reroll a hit roll of 1. If they are leadership 5 or under half, full rerolls to hit. This one's a bit situational, personally. And this is kind of what I was referring to earlier, where this directly is affected by your leadership shenanigans. Now, you get +1 to wound if you have the second part right here. Half strength or leadership 5. This gives you full rerolls to hit, which is pretty gosh darn good. All right, especially in the CSM Codex, where the wanton rules give you exploding 6s. That adds a ton of value. It's also shooting or fight phase, which gives a ton of flexibility. What's interesting about this trait is that even if you can't reach this threshold, they have this mini threshold above here instead, just below starting strength, aka they've only lost 1 casualty, or if they're leadership 6 or less, allowing you to adjust that a little bit more. This is kind of something I wish would be part of the regular Night Lord's trait. As you see, they have a below half or leadership 5, add 1 to the attack's wound roll. What I would much rather prefer, if I could change the Night Lord's Legion trait, I would adjust it to be like this. If it is below starting strength or leadership of a 6 or less, reroll a wound roll of 1, and then if they're this, you may choose one of the following. Add 1 to the attack's wound roll, or re-roll a wound roll of 1. If I had to change the Night Lord's trait, I would do something along this lines. This allows it to be more useful into other matchups, and this allows you to have flexibility. Because you might be fighting transhuman where this never works, awesome, reroll a wound roll of 1. You might be fighting Iron Warriors or Valorous Heart where you don't get rerolls against them, awesome, just stick with the +1 to wound. It makes it so the threshold you have to hit as Night Lords is nowhere near as jarring, and it gives them a lot more play into other stuff. Will that make them overpowered? Who knows? Possibly, but that's what I'm thinking of in my mind, and I'm curious to see how that would end up working. Despite that all, I very much enjoyed this stratagem. I think that it's not often usable, this part of it, unless you're using a very large brick like the 10 Bricky Terminators. But this one right here, to have full rerolls to hit for any size unit whatsoever with 1 CP can be disgusting. 10 Terminators rolling up, full rerolls to hit in melee against, say, Orc Boys or a big squad, like that can hurt. That can hurt real bad. And I did say it's a badass name. Next up, we have something called Screaming Skies. It's a very simple one. Take a jump pack unit, lift them up in the air. Next turn, put them down somewhere else. Simple. It's very flexible. It's solid. Can pull them out of a bad situation. You can use it for R&D, get engaged, good for actions. Lots of great options there. Very usable. It's just good. sisters have a stratagem like this. A few other, I think AdMech might have one like that. The Taraxes. Just good. It's a simple, decent strat. Next one. We're gonna talk about this one now. Flay them alive. Love the name. Use this stratagem in the fight phase. When the enemy Warlord is destroyed by a melee attack by a Night Lord's unit. Until the end of the battle, subtract 1 from combat attrition tests. This can, once again, spike really goddamn hard. Remember that orc situation I mentioned earlier? Orcs. So they run on 1s. Under half strength, run on 1s and 2s. Night Lords, run on 1s, 2s, and 3s. One piece at a time, 3s to 4s. Flay them alive. They only don't run on 6s. It can be Mimi. The problem, once again, is that you subtract 1 from the combat attrition tests. Does this matter against knights? No. Does this matter against Deathwing? No. Does this matter against most things that ignore combat attrition tests? No. Does this matter against Custodes? No. And Creations of Bile has a significantly better one. Screw you, Bile. Taken alive, a Creations of Bile stratagem. When you kill the enemy warlord in melee by a Creations of Bile unit, until the end of the battle, subtract 1 from the leadership characteristic. They can never re-roll a morale test, and they can never use the insane bravery stratagem. This is such a good Night Lord stratagem. It's almost as if they got them mixed up. This is so much fucking better, and it's not only better, but it's so Night Lords too. Think about it. They can't reroll morale tests. Awesome. They're running away more often. Great for Night Lords. Great for your secondaries. Sow the seed, reap the fear. No more insane bravery stratagems. Same deal. Really good. Adds a lot to it. -1 leadership, -1 leadership enemy army wide. That can be so good because it will give you those thresholds that you need for Sound the Black Hunt, leadership 5 and 6, or the actual trait itself. Think about it. Like what is the I'm losing it right here. What is the leadership of a Chaos Knight? Okay, the leadership of a Chaos Knight is leadership 9. This means that with a fearsome enemy, Demon Prince, Possessed, Raptors, etc., that give you -1 leadership plus the Night Lord trait for -2, aka -3, and then the Warlord ability -4. You may now take leadership 9 and lower to allow them to get the +1 to wound. It's so darn handy, and it's so fucking Night Lordsy. It allows you to run after the opponent's warlord, the leading member of the enemy, which the Night Lords love, and then you flay them alive, debuffing the rest of their army. And it synergizes so fucking well. It's so good. It's so good. It's my sad face. I'm so upset because this would be perfect. It rewards you for going after the opponent's warlord, a Night Lord's thing to do. It synergizes well. It creates a stratagem, like a strategy for you to do. If anything, GW, please, if you're gonna do this, at least make Flay Them Alive do 1 or 2 things. Give it subtract 1 from leadership and combat attrition, or let me pick. Give me both, or let me pick, please. Because I can't use combat attrition. Like, I'll probably pick combat attrition against, say, like Guard or Orcs or Genestealer cults, but I would pick leadership against Knights, Custodes, Deathwing, etc. Please. It's such a... Bile has such a better one, and it's not... Oh, it's not Night Lordsy. Okay. I have to sip my coffee, and I'll stop ranting. Okay. Next stratagem. We have come for you. One of my favorite names because it's a Night Lord's thing, and I mean, there are 3 Night Lords things. There is in Midnight Clad, We Have Come For You, and Ave Dominus Nox. Simple one. Core Demon King or character unit. So long as the enemy is not a vehicle, Titanic, or aircraft, they cannot fall back. 2 CP is a bit pricey, but no fallback is amazing. And it now works on characters that aren't infantry, like the Disco Lord or the Demon Prince. The fact that you can just roll up to an enemy, even if it's just a single person, 1 Eldar warrior, 1 Tyranid Termagant, 1 like a battle suit, a Tau Fire warrior, anything, and you can just say, yeah, by the way, my incredibly horrifying Demon Prince is now in your lines and you can't move. This is why when I scroll back up and we talk about From the Night, imagine that 10 brick of Terminators rolls in, you get that 9-inch charge, you get lucky, you get that 9-inch charge, you roll up, you murder something, you do your, what's it called, a consolidation into an enemy, and then bam, they can't fall back. You have massively wrecked your opponent's day. Massively wrecked your opponent's day. Like, this is great. It's expensive and situational, but when it's good, it's good. Underhand Scheming, 1 CP, fall back in charge. It's great. Let's fall back in charge. Like, let's fall back in charge. It's great. Alpha Legion gets it for free, but whatever. It's great. Fall back in charge. Really good on your jetpack units because you just fly over them. But the best part about it, it is used at the start of your charge phase. So you don't actually need to declare you're doing it until the charge phase. It's great because then you might overshoot the enemy and you don't even need a charge. Who knows? You don't know what'll happen. Psychic powers, you know what'll happen. You can use it in the charge phase. Super handy. Last but not least, we have Vox Scream. 2 CP. It's at the end of your movement phase. Select an enemy unit within 12 inches, and they lose all of their aura abilities until the start of your next movement phase again. Now, this one is expensive at 2 CP. You can only use it once per game, which is also good to note, but this can have insane value. It's very situational, but it truly can have insane value. It's a little unfortunate that you can't turn off things like point effects. Example, Abaddon's ability to point at a unit and give it full reroll or full rerolls. Same thing with Morven Vol. But even then, Morven Vol gives reroll ones to hit and wound. I'd turn that off for 2 CP. Gilliman, I'd turn that off for 2 CP. Smaller things though, like the Space Marine Chaplain's full rerolls to hit aura. I'd turn that off. Yeah. Or think about relics. What if your opponent has a 6-inch aura of give your units obsec? Turn off their obsec giving ability. That's huge. That's gigantic. This stratagem will change objectives. It'll change hits. It'll make your army survive. There is a lot of good options here with Vox Scream. I will go games where I never use it, and I will go games where like it's the most important stratagem in the entire game and it changes the entire game. You never really know. The fact that you have it though is pretty great. All right, moving on, we've got relics. We already kind of went over this one, the Claw of the Stygian Count. It's pretty good. It's a great combination lightning claw ability. The ignoring wound cap is really good. It's great for ignoring feel no pains as well. The extra attacks, the AP is solid. The only problem is that it's up against the Nurgle relic. I think it'll be pretty good against with like a Blender Demon Prince or a Terminator Lord with all of the buffs stacked on him. I think on a Demon Prince with Flames of Spite, it can be pretty good, but it is up against the Nurgle relic. So it's kind of up to you. Terminator Lord, if he was like 10 points cheaper, maybe 15 points cheaper, but it depends. It's not bad, but it's nothing like crazy. Scourging Chains. This is a special ability that gives all of your attacks +1 AP in melee, And if you're within engagement range of the enemy, you subtract 1 from their attack's characteristic. Now, this AP is really good into Armor of Contempt. I'd say that the best target is a Disco Lord by far, because the Disco Lord's AP is -2 on the Bladed Limbs, -3 on the Chain Glaive, and AP 0 on the Mech Tendrils. Going from 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and 0 to 1. 0 to 1 doesn't really matter against Armor of Contempt, but the rest, pretty darn good. The -1 attack is kind of crap against any characters, but it's great into hordes. I mean, imagine, say, Termagants or Hormagaunts in Tyranids. Hormagaunts have 3 attacks each, and sometimes I think they can even have more. Dropping that down to 2 attacks each is literally nerfing them by 33%. Anything that has 2 attacks going down to 1, like, I don't know, Orc Boys, pretty good. I think they have Choppas though. Still pretty good. But against things that have a ton of attacks, it's less powerful. So it depends on what you have. I'd say this is good on a Disco Lord and nothing but. Vox Demonicus. This is a terrible relic. It's really bad. You can't have enemies set up within 12 inches of the bearer. It's only for infantry as well, or cultist models. Also, each time the enemy unit attempts to perform an action or a psychic action within 12 inches of the bearer, roll 2d6. The result is greater than their leadership characteristic. They cannot attempt to perform it. I really don't like this one. I really don't like this one for a couple of reasons. 1, it's infantry only. 2, it's only 12 inches. Well, the reinforcement thing makes sense, but this part is only 12 inches. That's not very good at all. And it stops them from performing the action. It doesn't fail the action. If it fails the action, you get points for sow the seed, reap the fear. But it just stops them from doing it in general. This should be probably 18 inches if I could have my way, instead of 12. And I would honestly make it more of a, if they attempt to do an action at the end of the, or at the end of, when the opponent would complete an action, roll 2d6, and if it beats their leadership characteristic, they fail the action. This will be good because if it's on their turn, you could still screw with them a little bit, you know? They try to do something like ancient machineries or whatever. You have the aura, and it's like, all right, we're rolling the 2 dice. Let's see if we beat them, and you do, and they fail the action. That could put a real wrench in their system. But for now, I don't think it's very good at all. Now, I like this one a lot. The Talons of the Night Terror. All right, so it's a Night Lord's Fly model only, but it can be placed on a sergeant in a squad. Raptors and I think Warp Talons, maybe, I'm not sure. When you fly over an enemy, you roll a dice, and on a 2-up, -1 if they're a character, they take D3 mortal wounds. If you charge an enemy, on a 2-up, they take D3 mortal wounds. Now, I find this really fun. I really like this relic because you just can, let's say, take a 10-man squad of, here's the ideal scenario. Take a 10-man squad of raptors, right? Give the sergeant the relic. You give them the Marcus Slanesh, and maybe you give them advance and charge by a dark apostle, maybe. They move 12 plus d6. Let's say you get average, which is a 3 or a 4, 15, 16-inch move. You fly them over the enemy. They take D3 mortal wounds. You then charge them. They take D3 mortal wounds. Then you use the stratagem, which is, I forget its name, something impact maybe, which allows you to roll a dice for every jump pack unit in engagement range. And if you equal or exceed their toughness, you do a mortal wound. So if there's 10 of them, like I have, and you're hitting something with toughness 4, then you've done D3 mortals, and then an average of 5 more mortal wounds for 1 CP and a relic. That's a lot. That's an average of 9 mortal wounds to things like Deathwing. Maybe, I think, 7 mortal wounds to like Blight Lord Terminators. It's pretty darn nasty. Also, you have a fallback and charge stratagem. So you, if you get caught up in melee, can then fall out your raptors, which means you're flying over them, do D3 mortal wounds, and then charge them again, and then do D3 mortal wounds. It's really good to just cause chip damage and be an overall asshole. You can just fly over really strong targets and be annoying and cause issues. And even though it's only a 3-up against enemy characters, 3-up's not bad, you know? It's not bad. Oh, was this in chat? But it says normal move or advanced, not fallback though. Isn't a fallback a normal move? You're just moving out of the enemy's range. I need to double check the core rules for that one. Cause I don't know if it's like, you might be right. You actually might be right on that one. I'll need to double check that one. In that case, I'm gonna remove this. Still, you can still, even if that's the case, you can still charge them and do the mortal wounds anyway, in case you really need to hurt something. A DM Prince with wings could have this. I wouldn't, it's not, I don't think it's quite worth it. But a large raptor squad, I think, can actually make great use of this thing. A Slanesh marked 10-man squad of raptors with this is one of my favorites. Next up is the Misery of the Meek. It's a once per battle relic, and during the, I believe, the start at any phase, the bearer can regain 3 wounds, add D3 attacks characteristics until the end of the turn, and add 3 inches to the aura abilities of the bearer. Personally, I don't like this a lot because it's rare things end up surviving in this day and age. This game is overall very heavily based on overkilling enemies. Because if something survives, you're in like a world of hurt because they might have obsec or something of that nature. You want to overkill your enemy. Banking on them surviving to get this is not great. The D3 attacks is fine. The range is whatever. What are you gonna really have a range thing? Like a Lord maybe? It also fights real tough with Intoxicating Elixir, which Intoxicating Elixir is a Slanesh relic, which is very, very good. What it does is it gives them D3 attacks, just like this does, and it wound gates them at 3 wounds. They can't lose more than 3 wounds during that fight phase. That's really good. That's really good, and I think far better than Misery of the Meek. I guess you could use it if you want to be an asshole. Throw it on a one with the Shadows Disco Lord and a and then a Zinch marked one, but Intoxicating Elixir is far better. This is probably the worst relic, I'd say. No, the Vox one is much worse, but this one's not great. Finally, Stormbolt Plate. You cannot fire at the infantry model if it is outside of 12 inches or unless it's the closest eligible target. Also, they get light cover and heavy cover as well. This is a weird one. Not being able to shoot them outside of 12 is pretty darn good, but you also have look out, sir, for that. Getting light cover and heavy cover at all times is pretty solid. Heavy cover is pretty rare. If you don't know what heavy cover is, imagine light cover, but in melee. It's +1 to your save in melee. So having it on a Terminator Lord or a Sorcerer, because it's infantry only, is not bad. It gives them a 1-up save in melee and cover, or melee and ranged, which is not too bad. But I personally don't think it's that good. My only caveat for it would be maybe on a backline Terminator Sorcerer. I would say that it would be kind of good to have a Terminator Sorcerer and you make that Sorcerer your backline objective holder. Instead of taking like a 50-point cultist squad, you save it and you use it as them. They can't be shot because they're too far. And then they're just kind of throwing out psychic powers and just kind of being an annoying or a nuisance in the back line. But the HQ slot's already really contested, and I don't know. I don't think Stormbolt Plate is that good overall. I think it's a bit mediocre. It's mainly because it's an infantry thing. If this was on like a Disco Lord, oh yeah, I'd take it. Oh yes, I would, but it's not. Oh well. Finally, you've got Flayer. It is a relic, power sword, cursed weapon, or force sword. It is +2, -3, 2 damage, and enemies count as 2 destroyed models in the morale phase. Pretty good against certain things like Mech, Sisters, and Krons, because you can meet that threshold for leadership failure much better. But then it's terrible against everything else. I'm not going to take it against Custodes or Knights or Deathwing, and just so many things don't give a shit. You know, I would really like it if it would give you like maybe -1 leadership to the squad as well. Just because then you can meet a threshold for another model or something, but it's really not that good. I would give it some leadership debuff to the enemy as well. Like, units struck by this sword have -1 leadership until the next fight phase, or until the end of the fight phase. It's like, oh cool, I've prepped them for my next squad of enemies or units. But besides that, it's okay. Relics aren't as good as the Warlord traits for Night Lords. Oh, so that is all of the main stuff for the Night Lords. Now, what should you try it on? So I mentioned a few already, but I'll give you some options here. The Demon Prince with wings with the Nurgle Relic Sword and the Killing Fury Warlord trait. Mentioned this one already. That sword, really good, meets those wound caps. The Killing Fury trait hits hard, extra attacks. Wanton Slaughter turns 1 and 2, great to have. You sink a lot of attacks in and possibly take out very high and very powerful units in one go. The Demon Prince for buffing, I kind of like this one. You run Night Haunter's Curse and a Mark of Tzeentch to make them very tanky, and you give them the Mantle of Traitors. The Mantle of Traitors allows them to use an Epic Deed strat for 0 CP, which you can then use the Great Sorcerer. Because they're Tzeentch, it allows them to cast an additional power or do a psychic action and then a power. Really good for psychic interrogation. And it also allows you to re-roll your hit rolls in melee, and it allows you to pick a core unit on the battlefield in the command phase and give them re-roll 1s to hit. So it allows them to just kind of send off re-roll 1s to hit for a random unit. It's actually got some play that many people may not know about. Also, Night Haunter's Curse is for the tankiness or for just being stronger with your hits. The Disco Lord. Scourging Chains and Warlord trait of your choosing. I'd personally go with like Flames of Spite, but if you want to make him tankier, I'd say that you could also run something on the lines of, what is that one? One with the Shadows. Disco Lord with Scourging Chains, I mentioned, is very, very strong and very useful. Master of Executions. Okay, this is the Dank Master. The Dank Master. This is disgusting. Disgusting. Mark, I should also probably add the Mark of Slaanesh. So, this is a Night Lord's specialty. You give this guy the Warp's Malice and you give the Night Haunter's Curse. You roll his ass up, right? He's going up, it's ready, it's time to go. You run up. You run your boy up. It's turn 2. You got your gun. 4 shots, all right? You go, you aim. You spend 1 CP on that Mark of Slaanesh. If it works, we haven't figured that one out yet, but let's say it does. You fire 4 shots. Bang, bam, bam, bam. You turn it sideways just in case. You get maybe 1/6. Awesome. Night Haunter's Curse into a 6. Slaanesh ability into a 6. Bada bing. You have now taken 6 mortal wounds. Those 3 mortal wounds, you're in Wanton Massacre? Yeah, Massacre. They then generate, or Slaughter, they then generate 3 more hits. You now have 4 hits at 5 AP2, 2 damage in addition to your 6 mortal wounds. Holy shit. You take the bitch. You give him Diabolical Strength. What's that? 2 more attacks? Don't mind if I do. You run him up. He immediately rolls 8 goddamn attacks at your enemy. Any 6s? Awesome. 2 mortal wounds. And they generate attacks. Then you turn 1 into a 6. 2 mortal wounds. 1 CP Marcus Slaanesh. 2 mortal wounds. All of that generates additional hits if you're in Slaughter. full rerolls to wound against enemy characters. Strength 9, AP 3, 2 damage with diabolical strength, which I always take on legionaries with Balefire Tome. This guy fucks. Finally, for other abilities, that's not the Dank Master, run this guy. Chat, run this guy. I love, he's so fun. He is so fun. He is also underpriced. Get ready for him to be 10. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that he is only, with the mark, 80 points and 2 CP. That's it. 80 points and 2 CP. And 1 CP for the stratagem on the if you ever want to use it. But you might not have to, you know? 80 points for that bullshit. God damn it. Anyway, other things to use. Possessed. They have the -1 leadership aura, really good. Helps meet thresholds, good melee profile. Raptors, same deal. Warp Talons, jump pack infantry, always good, and you have to roll against them to try to fall back. Terminators, get that Atramentar in there, man. Also, all these things are great at coming in early with From the Night. You know, I'd also say bikers. I think CSM bikers are a bit underrated, probably because their model looks like trash. But I'd say bikers are pretty good. The 10-man brick with the Black Rune of Damnation. Use that 1 CP. First turn, you bring them up there. They are a menace to deal with. They are so tough. They are so tanky, and they hurt real bad. I mentioned the 10-man Raptor Skull with the Talons of the Night Terror. Really fun one. Love them. I think Chosen, MSU Chosen are really good in Night Lords. Just having them around there, being able to plink off shots with their bolters and having really good melee, but not too good. Still being tanky. They got some good stuff with Chosen. I think Chosen are very solid in Night Lords. Also, MSU Balefire Tome. I love the Balefire Tome. I think throwing Prescience on stuff, Diabolical Strength on your special units, and then also being able to get a new source of, say, Delightful Agonies for the 5-up Feeling of Pain. Just stuff like that's really good. Closing thoughts. Significantly better than before, Night Lords are. I thought they were the worst trait in the game, in the Codex originally. I'd say that Alpha Legion might be worse than Night Lords if Night Lords aren't fighting an army they're good against. If Night Lords are fighting things like Guard or Orcs, I think they're very solid. But if they're fighting Custodians and stuff, I'd say that they're the worst Legion behind Alpha Legion. That being said, compared to their old ways, they are significantly better. They need more ways to buff leadership. They need, or to debuff leadership. They need more. I want that Flay them alive to reduce their leadership by 1, or have that damn Creation of Bile ability. I think even the Space Marines have a special. I think they have a darn like discipline, like the Librarius discipline, that actually has a -2 leadership or something. Something along those lines. It's really annoying, but they don't have anything like that. They don't have any kind of put minus of a leadership on you with like a psychic power or any kind of targeted ability. I would love a -2 leadership targeted ability. Do they have that? I could have sworn that they had something like that for Space Marines, but I might be wrong. Maybe it's one of the various chapters' ability to do something along those lines, because god damn it, I would love that kind of thing to be usable. They need more like that. I think Night Lords need a named character. I want them to have Sahal, definitely, and I want that named character to have a leadership debuff. Maybe some kind of pick an enemy unit within 24 inches, -1 leadership them. Something like that. Make it so you can't just spread it and proliferate it, but give them a targeted ability to affect it in leadership in some way. And then I'd like a chapter master. Come on, give me a chapter master, please. I want a chapter master. Please give me some Sahal. I mentioned that the trait should have a little bit of adjustment. It's a bit wordy, but like Sound the Black Hunt, I would like some adjustment like that with the reroll 1s to wound. They are held up by their auxiliary options, their strats, their warlord traits, their relics that help them out a ton, and they are shockingly fluffy. They are a surprisingly well-realized fluffy army. They play a lot like Night Lords should play. The problem is that the game doesn't like leadership shenanigans because there are so many, you know, cancel your leadership abilities stuff and fearlessness around the game. That's the problem. If leadership was a bigger factor, they'd be a lot stronger, but unfortunately it is not. Questions. Final questions and closing thoughts. Chat. If you have any questions you'd like me to answer, please leave them in the chats and I will do my very best to answer them. Where do you think Night Lords now fall in a competitive tier list? In terms of, in the CSM book, they are probably the worst, if not second worst, with Alpha Legion overall. In terms of the CSM book in general, it depends on what you're running against, but I'd say they're maybe B-. I think their Warlord trait stuff hold them up, and the CSM book overall is pretty decent, but I'd give them B-. Let's see. Night Lords are winning GTs. A Night Lord is winning a GT. There's one guy who is doing a very good job with Night Lords. Is doing very good. But besides him, there's not a whole lot of other Night Lord stuff, but he's doing a good job, which I'm very happy to see. Did you forget about the strat that's to stop an action? So there is a 1 CP strat with Chaos Undivided that allows you to pick an enemy unit within 12 inches, stop them from using the Insane Bravery strat or re-rolling the morale test, and if they fail morale, they end up failing an action. The problem is that if you take anything that forces you to wait until your next command phase to complete an action, you're probably, well, you're not doing that. No one does that. People take actions that are completed on their turn, and you're not going to fail morale on your turn unless you get stabbed by me. And if that's the case, why are you charging me? And you can't do an action when you're in, you know, close combat. So it doesn't really work out. How long did it take you to make this presentation? 30 minutes. Not too long. Do you plan on running Night Lords at events? Yes, I actually have a couple RTTs that I kind of want to take this to. I recently remodeled my Master of Executions as a Night Lords Praetor. The Horus Heresy Praetor guy with the giant axe, and threw Night Lords them up a little bit. Thoughts on Chaos Spawn? They also have -1 leadership bubble and are super cheap. I think Chaos Spawn are actually a little bit underrated. The problem is that the fast attack slot is very, very good. Venom Crawlers are nuts, but there's also Warp Talons, Raptors, and Bikers. Lots in that area. I wasn't here for the beginning, but did you talk about the Chosen versus Termes debate? I think it really depends on what you're looking for. I think that the 10 brick with the Damnation is particularly good in Night Lords because of the From the Night strat to deep strike them turn 1, which can be insane. But I would also say that Chosen are point for point just more efficient in good MSU blocks. Honestly, I take both. In my current list, I actually am running 2 squads of 5 Terminators and 2 squads of 5 Chosen, often with the mark of Nurgle. Now that the Demon Prince no longer has a gun, is it still worth it in a Night Lord list? Yes, I'd say the Demon Prince is particularly good with one of these 2 options. The Mantle of Traitors buff with the tanky variant, or the Killing Fury Nurgle Sword variant. Particularly this top one, I think you'll see a lot of because, well, they might swap out Killing Fury for like Dirty Fighter, but I think you'll see this a lot to deal with wound-gated units like the Nightbringer, for example. What do you think is the worst Night Lords unit? Pretty much a never take. Well, that doesn't really work out well because there's no such thing as the worst Night Lords unit. There is just bad units in general. And in that case, I'd pick the Exalted Champion, I guess. A 90-point Lieutenant that just kind of sucks, you know? Or a Defiler. It's not about Night Lords bad units, it's about just being bad units. How do you feel about the internal balance in the book? I think this is one of the better books that GW has come out with. I'd give them a solid A. There are some bizarre choices that they've made, like not allowing Terminators to take an icon and not allowing Havocs to take an icon, but I get why. I think overall, the CSM are a little bit starved for shooting options and also are a bit starved for anti-aircraft. If you have to fight enemy flyers, you're gonna have a hard time. You're gonna need to charge them with warp talons or shoot them, and your shooting is not good. There are a lot of great hero combinations. That's why when you look at units to try, most of them are just characters. Master of Executions is insane, Disco Lord's insane, Demon Prince is insane. The Lords could be better, but the Master of Possession is nutty good. The Dark Apostle is nutty good. And a lot of the other units like the Chosen and Terminators and the Legionaries and the Cultists and the Accursed Cultists, all great. The Land Raiders better, the Mauler Fiends are decent, Oblits are not bad, Havocs are decent, Hellbrute I don't think is very good. But everything else, the fast attack section, Bikers, Spawn, Raptors, Venom Talons, Warp Talons, really solid. Lots of great options in the book. And I would hope that if they had the ability to give things icons, that'd be just a nice way to buff stuff. Like, let's say Havocs are just not performing very well. All you'd really need to do is say, this unit can take a Chaos icon, and boom, the Mark of Nurgle or the Mark of Tzeentch is an instant take. Probably the Mark of Tzeentch because it gives you +1 AP to your shooting, but the Mark of Nurgle might not be that bad for auto wounding on 6s. You know, like it's instantly bam, it's made the unit better. Or same thing for the Chaos Terminator squad. I'd like some buffs here and there to some units. I think the Sorcerer is too expensive and just not worth taking over the Demon Prince. I think the Dark Commune is a bit weak overall. That I love that like 5-man cultist model. I could go down maybe 20 points. And the Chaos Lords are particularly bad too. The loss of jump packs on them really sucks as a Night Lords player, but I mean, I'm complaining enough about that one already. Let's see. Is it worth bringing a Chaos Knight using Agents of Chaos to fill the anti-flying DACA slots? I think Chaos Knights are very balanced in Agents of Chaos in general, so I see no reason to bring one at all. I think some Chaos Knights have minus leadership auras too, so it may actually be useful. I'm not quite sure. It really depends. All right, that should be good. Unless, one more question here. Do you think any rules that ignore leadership or combat attrition should be removed or heavily altered, or do you think they have a place in the game? I'm okay with some. I am fine with the idea of ignoring leadership modifiers, or better yet, I would like, instead of ignoring leadership modifiers, say this squad gets +1 to combat attrition tests. So, because of that, you can have it so that they lose one guy from morale, but they don't lose anything more. But if you have the ability to stack leadership, it still might work out. And if they're below half, they still get affected. I like that kind of stuff. I think Fearless needs to go away. I think Fearless just needs to go away. I'm sick of it. I get why, but it makes no sense. Why are Deathwing leadership 9 and Fearless when Custodes are leadership 11 and not Fearless? And I'll tell you why. It's because there's a lot of things that affect leadership and you need to roll against the enemy. There's a lot of like roll against the enemy leadership and then they can't fall back or they fight last, which I think is a incubi ability. So because of that, it makes Custodes leadership really good because a lot of your abilities to screw with them just don't work, which is a great way to do that. I like Custodians having leadership 11. I'm glad they don't have ignore all that kind of stuff. Well, why do Deathwing have fearless? Why does Thousand Sons have fearless? I know why, but instead find a different way about it. For example, when I played D&D and when I was a DM, often my buddies would have a sword that does D8 damage. Instead of buffing their sword because they got better, whatever reason, and making it a D12 sword, I instead changed the damage of the sword to 2d4. It's not because instead of like the sword having a higher output, it instead has a higher average because they're proficient with it. A higher floor and a higher overall average. You know, like I would much rather, instead of having D3 plus 3 damage or D6, give me 2d3 damage. You know, like there's gotta be an in-between. Don't give all these things fearless like it's crazy, but give them maybe combat attrition test +1 or something like that, you know? Make it so I can still mess with you a little bit. That's what I'd say. Oh, this actually reminds me one final thing I'd like to mention. There is a special psychic secondary called Psychic Interrogation that I really enjoy. What Psychic Interrogation does is you roll a psychic test on an enemy, and if you win at like a 4 or a higher, you gain 3 victory points with a character, that is. They've actually made an addendum where they buffed it, where if you roll higher or equal to the enemy's leadership, you actually gain a CP. And being Night Lords, it's not too bad to be able to stack +1 to cast, like with a Venom Crawler, and then -2 or 3 leadership on the enemy. And so you might roll over their leadership pretty often with Psychic Interrogation and get CP back pretty regularly. And then your opponent has to figure out, well, goddamn, am I going to deny Psychic Interrogation, or am I going to deny Pact of Flesh to regen his full Terminator, you know? I actually like to run that a lot with this buffing Demon Prince, because Mantle of Traitors lets him use the stratagem Mark of Tzeentch to cast a power and do a psychic action at the same time for 0 CP once per game. So you can do both and really make them choose. Anyway, thank you so much for watching my little presentation. I thoroughly appreciate you all taking the time to listen to me ramble about my favorite Chaos Legion. It's a lot of fun. I am not a pro player whatsoever. I would call myself average to slightly above average when it comes to playing 40k, but I really like this army. I find it a ton of fun. It's my favorite one. I know GW would never really take my advice for changes, but I hope, if anything, they might do a couple, or maybe one. Just the Flay Them Alive one. Please give me the -1 leadership on the Flay Them Alive one. Please. The fact that Fabius Bile has a better version than that makes me so mad. Please. All right. Woo. Wonderful. Thank you again for watching.